Good morning. As I've met with Canadian workers and labour unions across the country, I've heard the same thing over and over again. Canadian workers should know that we have their backs if they become seriously ill. But right now, our EI system only gives someone a maximum of 26 weeks to recover from an illness before they're expected to be back at work. Depuis un an, j'ai rencontré des milliers de travailleurs, des employés et de syndicats partout au pays. Quand je discute avec eux, j'entends toujours la même chose. Les travailleurs veulent savoir s'ils sont soutenus, notamment s'ils tombent malades. Mais le régime d'assurance-emploi actuel ne donne qu'un maximum de 26 semaines de congé avant de retourner travailler. That may be enough for many illnesses, but it simply isn't enough for serious illnesses like cancer. I'm sure that we have all known someone, a friend, a relative, who has battled cancer. We all know how devastating it is, how terrible the struggle can be, how much energy it takes. So we can all imagine if, on top of all that, you also had to worry that your EI benefits were running out and that you might not be able to put food on the table for your family. No Canadian should have to experience that. Canadian workers and their families deserve better. Canada's recovery plan will put working Canadians at the front of the recovery. Only Canada's Conservatives are prepared to stand up for workers and take action to protect and enhance paid sick leave. A Conservative government will increase EI sickness benefits from 26 weeks to 52 weeks for those suffering from a serious illness. Les travailleurs et leurs familles méritent mieux. Le plan de rétablissement du Canada va mettre les travailleurs au premier plan de la relance. Seuls les conservateurs sont prêts à défendre les travailleurs. Seuls les conservateurs vont agir pour améliorer les congés de maladie payés. Pour ce faire, un gouvernement conservateur va augmenter les prestations de 25 à 52 semaines en cas de maladie grave. So Canadian workers can focus on what matters, their health and their family. With Canada's recovery plan, we will ensure that sick workers receive the support they need to recover. You can't have a healthy economy without healthy workers. And that starts with our plan to stand up for workers. Together, we can secure the future. Ensemble, on va agir pour les travailleurs. Ensemble, on va agir pour l'avenir. Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much.
We will now be taking questions. Nous allons maintenant prendre les questions. Première question.
Oui, bonjour, M. O'Toole. Laurence Martin de Radio-Canada. Le chef libéral Justin Trudeau annonce aujourd'hui 1 milliard de dollars pour aider les provinces à mettre en place tout le système de passeport vaccinal. Est-ce que vous feriez la même chose si vous étiez premier ministre?
Je vais travailler en étroite collaboration avec les provinces, avec la pandémie et avec notre système de santé. C'est pourquoi j'ai déjà annoncé un investissement historique dans notre système de santé avec 60 milliards de dollars au cours d'une décennie, avec des autres investissements dans la santé mentale, dans la toxicomanie, les défis devant nous. Et je vais travailler comme un partenaire avec les provinces sur notre lutte contre la quatrième vague. Malheureusement, nous sommes en pleine élection à cause de M. Trudeau. On doit lutter le COVID-19 ensemble et je vais être là pour les provinces. We're in the midst of a fourth wave election because Mr. Trudeau's put his own political interests ahead of fighting together the fourth wave of COVID-19. I will always partner with the provinces to make sure we fight COVID together, and our historic investments that we've already announced in our public health care system, 6% minimum increase per year over the course of the 10 years, a historic once-in-a-generation investment of $60 billion to build up our public health system, to make sure we're ready, and being a partner between the provinces and the federal government, that will be our approach.
Mais sur la question spécifique des passeports vaccinaux, est-ce que vous seriez prêt à aider financièrement les provinces qui veulent mettre en place des passeports vaccinaux?
Je vais toujours respecter les décisions des provinces en ce qui concerne les passeports vaccinaux, les mesures sanitaires en pleine d'une pandémie. Et les provinces méritent un gouvernement qui va agir sur une crise sanitaire. Et c'est pourquoi on va donner plus d'argent pour notre système de santé, un autre 6% par année minimum. Et je vais être là pour le bien-être des Québécois, des Canadiens.
Next question.
I will be there for Canadians, for folks from coast to coast. As a federal partner, we will respect the provinces and their decisions with respect to health measures, with respect to balancing the needs of keeping people safe and keeping the economy going. And if the provinces make decisions on proof of vaccinations, vaccine passports, we will support and respect what the provinces decide to do. It is their decision to try and balance off making sure people are safe. We fight the fourth wave of the pandemic together.
Next question.
Andrew Lawton, True North. According to the Hill Times, China's ambassador to Canada, Kong Pei-Wu, implied the Conservatives are putting, quote, personal political interest, unquote, above the Canada-China relationship, which he characterized as stable and healthy. What's your response to that accusation?
Two of our citizens, Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor, are approaching 1,000 days in prison as diplomatic pawns. I would not suggest the relationship right now between Canada and China is stable. I would suggest Mr. Trudeau has been completely offside for 6 years with respect to our interests, with respect to trade, with respect to Huawei, with respect to human rights. It was the Conservatives that raised the genocide going on in Xinjiang province. It was the Conservatives that have been calling for Huawei to not be part of our 5G infrastructure. We need a serious Prime Minister that will stand up for our interests, our citizens, and our security. And getting the balance right, having a serious position with respect to China, is just one of the many reasons we need change in Canada.
Yesterday, Alberta announced the appointment of Terry Bryant, a lifelong gun owner, as the province's first appointed chief firearms officer. The move is one that Premier Kenney says will help balance public safety with a respect for property rights. Would you like to see more provinces go in that direction of Alberta? And as Prime Minister, how would you negotiate and navigate that relationship with provincially appointed CFOs?
Well, as Prime Minister, I'm going to try and work with all levels of government, municipalities, and law enforcement officials to tackle the real challenges facing public safety. We've seen a horrific rise of shootings in Vancouver, in Montreal. Organized crime has become a real problem in some of our cities, and we have to tackle those issues. The smuggling at borders, particularly in Quebec, where we've seen the border at Roxham and not be properly enforced, we have to work with guns and gang task forces in many of those centers, and we have to keep communities safe. So we will have a very balanced approach on criminal justice, stopping the illegal smuggling of firearms, working with law enforcement on organized crime and gangs. But on other issues, as I've said, where we've seen addiction and mental health intersect with the criminal justice system, we will show compassion where we need to, but we will show a more strict approach to keep families and communities safe. On doit travailler avec les autres paliers de gouvernement sur la sécurité publique. On a vu des attaques, des crimes à Montréal, à Vancouver, et on doit travailler ensemble contre les gangs de rue, contre les criminels. Et on doit fermer la porte à Chemin Roxham, par exemple, et travailler avec les policiers sur leur programme contre les gangs. Ça serait mon approche, de travailler avec les autres paliers, avec les policiers pour notre sécuritaire. C'est très important de travailler ensemble et ça serait mon approche.
Next question.
Good morning, Evan Dyer, CBC News. As you know, there's a small part of Afghanistan that has not fallen to the Taliban. The vice president of the former elected government has gone there, and he said that he is the legitimate successor since the president has fled, and he's appealing for international support. So I just want to ask you about a few decisions you would have to take about Prime Minister, about that situation. Would you recognize that as the legitimate continuation of the former Afghan government? Would you assist it? Would you arm it? And would you consider giving it air support if it comes under attack?
The situation, as I've said for weeks now, in fact, as we've been calling for months and even years, the situation on the ground in Afghanistan is heartbreaking. To see the Taliban once again exerting control, once again subjugating women, having no rule of law, no respect for human rights, it's heartbreaking. So yesterday I announced some concrete steps that I think Canada should be doing. We should be working closely with our allies and border states to provide refuge for people that are able to flee the Taliban. And with any that have links or their families to Canada, we need to bring them here. We need to show leadership. We need to work with our other allies to establish security corridors for both aid and for refugees. And I did say that we need to work with our allies to provide both political and material support in any way to try and help keep people safe and preserve the ability to provide aid to sections of the country. This is something we should be stepping up and working very closely with the Americans, the United Kingdom, and other allies on. I don't think Mr. Trudeau is a serious participant in these discussions. We need a serious Canada once again on the world stage, and that is what I will provide. On a besoin d'une voix sérieuse sur la scène internationale, et ça serait mon approche comme leader, comme un ancien combattant, un homme d'affaires, un leader expérimenté. Et hier, j'ai annoncé 3 mesures concrètes d'aider la situation sur le terrain en Afghanistan. On doit travailler en étroite collaboration avec nos alliés et les voisins de l'Afghanistan. On doit avoir des corridors sécuritaires et travailler en étroite collaboration avec l'Inde, par exemple. Et on va donner l'assistance politique et matérielle pour les gens sur le terrain en Afghanistan en partenariat avec nos alliés.
If elected, you will be representing Canada at the next climate summit. Will you take with you the number that the Liberal government committed to in June of a 40 to 45% reduction, or will you go back to the previous 30% reduction? Which number would you take to Canada's partners at that summit?
Well, Evan, in April, I launched a comprehensive climate change plan that will meet our Paris targets, but also get people back to work. Securing the future for our country means we need a strong economy to tackle climate change, to get our emissions down. We have a plan to do that. It's measured, and we put it forward because we will deliver on it. Mr. Trudeau has never met a target. He says whatever he needs to do, whatever he needs to say on a given day, he never has a plan, whether it's climate change, whether it's safe drinking water, whether it's the budget. We have a cost of living crisis in Canada. We have fear of national unity crisis in Canada. Canadians deserve a plan. We have that, Canada's recovery plan, that will pick up the country, get us back on our feet, and tackle climate change. We've committed to that. It's in Canada's recovery plan. On a un plan pour le changement climatique. J'ai lancé notre politique pour le changement climatique en avril. On va réduire les émissions de gaz à effet de serre tout en respectant une relance économique. D'une nation à l'autre, les Canadiens, les familles canadiennes méritent une reprise économique. Et ça serait notre approche ciblée sur l'économie parce qu'avec une économie forte, on va avoir une opportunité de réduire les émissions. Malheureusement, M. Trudeau, il n'a pas un plan pour l'avenir, pour notre économie, et pas un plan réel sur le changement climatique, seulement un taxe sur le carbone. On va atteindre nos objectifs de Paris tout en respectant les emplois.
Next question.
Hi, Mr. O'Toole. Stephanie Taylor with the Canadian Press. What percent, I would like a number, please, sir, what percent do you commit to cut Canada's emissions by?
As I've said, in April, we launched our plan on climate change.
Percent, please.
it will meet the Paris objectives. It's not changing the Paris objectives. We will meet the Paris objectives that were actually set by the tail end of the Conservative government and signed on to by the Liberal government. The key difference, Mr. Trudeau signed on and had no plan to achieve them. In fact, he said he would never raise his carbon tax. He's tripling his carbon tax. In April, we put forward a plan to meet our Paris objectives. And it will be a challenge to meet some of those objectives. That's why we worked with experts to try and make sure we can lower emissions and get people back to work. If people want to get the country working again, there's only one option in this election, the Conservative Party. We will get the economy moving and tackle climate change. It's in Canada's recovery plan, and I invite Canadians to look at our plan and give us your support in the election. We need to get the country back on track.
Canada has a new target, which is 40 to 45%, and you're going to go to Glasgow while the rest of the world is raising their ambition, and you seem to want to stick to Canada's old target at 30%. Why will you not honor the new target, which is 40 to 45%, when all other G7 nations are ramping up their ambition?
Canadians want a plan for our economy, for our economic recovery, and for climate change. I put out a plan, the most detailed plan before an election in Canadian history, not made up on the back of a napkin, as Mr. Trudeau does. In the 10 days after I launched our plan in April, he changed his targets 3 times with no plan. Canadians are tired, year after year. Everything Mr. Trudeau says, those really nice announcements, he never follows up on all issues, from climate change to jobs to ethics and accountability to the deficit. Canadians are tired of that. So what we've put forward is Canada's recovery plan, get the country working again, and secure our environment. We are going to meet our Paris commitments, and we have a plan to get those emissions down while getting the country back to work. I invite people to check out our plan. Canada's recovery plan is exactly what we need after this last year and a half for our country, and after 6 years of ethical scandals and false promises from Justin Trudeau.
Next question.
Good morning, Mr. O'Toole. Marika Walsh with the Globe and Mail. Last night you posted a video outlining what you think should be done next in Afghanistan. You mentioned giving material support to Afghans resisting the Taliban. What material support is that? What are you talking about there?
Yesterday, I said Canada should be doing more. I'm really disappointed to see how slow the Trudeau government was, but let's focus on helping now. So I provided 3 concrete steps, working closely with allies on helping people that can flee the Taliban immediately, including in neighboring countries, working with those allies, including India, to establish more longer-term corridors for safe route for refugees, but also for aid to get into the country.
Can you answer my question?
And the third issue, political and material support alongside our allies. Political support for people trying to keep the Taliban out of certain parts of the country, and material support in terms of intelligence, in terms of logistics support, in terms of satellite imaging. We've done this previous times, providing support for Ukraine, for example. Canada needs to play our role with our allies. And our allies right now see the chaos in Afghanistan, see the sad situation. How can Canada play a serious role to provide support to keep people safe on the ground? On doit aider les gens sur le terrain en Afghanistan. Hier, j'ai proposé 3 mesures concrètes pour ça. Une approche en étroite collaboration avec nos alliés et les réfugiés. Aussi une approche avec l'Inde et nos alliés pour les corridors sécuritaires et assistance politique et matérielle pour les gens sur le terrain en Afghanistan. C'est possible de travailler avec nos alliés, d'utiliser l'équipement, les renseignements, d'aider les gens sur le terrain, mais on doit travailler avec les Américains, avec la Royaume-Uni et avec nos alliés.
Thank you for that. As a follow-up on your discussion around creating safe corridors and your mention of India, does that mean that you see Pakistan as the safest route to get people out? Can you just clarify what you mean by that?
We have to work with our allies and all border nations. We're already seeing refugees fleeing Afghanistan. The Taliban regime is a brutal one. We also see the ability to stop access for the Taliban to get resupplied. That means we have to work with all nations in the region and our allies to put that pressure and to provide those corridors. That includes Pakistan. That includes partnering with India and other countries in the region to make sure that we protect and help as many people as we can. That's why I said yesterday, let's work together to make sure we do more to help people, particularly that are at risk because they stood with Canada. On doit travailler avec nos alliés et avec les voisins de l'Afghanistan, incluant Pakistan, d'aider les gens sur le terrain, d'arrêter l'approvisionnement de le Taliban avec l'équipement, par exemple. Et on doit établir les corridors sécuritaires dans la région pour les réfugiés, pour l'aide. Et c'est le temps pour un Canada fort en partenariat avec nos alliés d'aider les Afghans sur le terrain.
Hi, this is Mr. O'Toole. It's Kate Bolingaro from Bloomberg News. What do you think of the Liberal Party's proposal to tax banks?
Well, this election, which Mr. Trudeau called in a pandemic with forest fires in British Columbia and with the situation in Afghanistan, the chaos, Mr. Trudeau has provided no reason for the election and no plan. Now they're talking about raising taxes on businesses, on a whole range of economic actors. What we've provided is an alternative vision. Canada's recovery plan with 5 pillars: get people working, focus on accountability, focus on mental health, being more prepared for a crisis in the future, and getting our budget back to balance over the course of the next decade. We actually think we need to see businesses investing, and that's what our plan is going to do. Help some of the hardest hit small and medium-sized players and tackle the cost of living crisis in the country right now, from housing to the cost of goods and inflation. Mr. Trudeau has no plan. We have Canada's recovery plan.
And what about the fact that the banks did actually do very well during the pandemic, largely due to the fact that there was government aid that was helping households? Don't you think it's fair that they pay more?
We've said in Canada's recovery plan that we would like to see more open banking. We think Canada is lagging on innovation and other measures where other countries, people own their financial information and can use it with fintech and other tools. We're also against the programs that have helped some parts of corporate Canada, some big enterprises, have record profit years, and we see the tourism operators here in Newfoundland and Labrador hanging on by a thread, not getting dedicated support. So Canada's recovery plan is about helping the critically hit sectors, helping people get back to work, and not helping the large corporations, whether they're banks or grocery chains, who've had record years. We need to supply the support to where it's needed to get people back to work. That's what Canada's recovery plan will deliver.
Next question.
Hi, sir. Just want to ask you, as Kevin Gallagher, CTV National News, specifically, when you're talking about materials that you provide to the opponents of the Taliban, would you provide arms to the opponents of the Taliban? Would you provide weapons?
In the 3 concrete steps I mentioned yesterday, it's working with our allies on people that can flee the Taliban. It's working on establishing safe corridors, and it's political and material support with our allies. Of course, we have to partner with the United States, with allies in NATO that we served with in Kandahar province in the longest mission in Canadian Armed Forces history. We've had an experience in parts of Ukraine where we've provided intelligence, we've provided satellite imaging, we've provided flak jackets, we've provided a range of tools that will help keep people safe on the ground. Canada has a role to play, but it has to be alongside our allies, and it has to be focused on getting people out of there that are at risk because they served with Canada.
When We didn't hear anything about arms in that answer. Just want to point that out, but I'm going to move on. You've said that you're going to support the provinces to do what they want to do around vaccine passports. Some provinces may not issue them. We know it's a debate. So the federal government was going to issue vaccine passports to Canadians, of course, if they wanted to travel abroad for other countries that have restrictions. As Prime Minister, would you issue federal vaccine passports for Canadians that want to travel abroad?
As I've said, the federal government needs to be a key partner with the provinces, and the main thing we need to do is to make sure we deliver vaccines faster. They're the most critical tool in this fight against COVID-19. We also need a more substantial leadership role on rapid testing and screening, and to rebuild the public healthcare system. That's why we've announced a once-in-a-generation record investment of at least a 6% increase in health transfers. What provinces do in terms of getting the balance right of keeping the economy open and keeping people safe, we will respect and partner with. That will be our approach. If people want to travel abroad, they will have to follow the rules of entry for those countries, whether it's proof of vaccination. We need to facilitate that. But in terms of partnering with the provinces, we need to get them the tools they need to keep their people safe. On doit travailler ensemble comme un pays en pleine d'une pandémie. Et le gouvernement fédéral doit avoir un approvisionnement suffisant des vaccins, des dépistages rapides, tous les outils nécessaires. Je vais toujours respecter les décisions des provinces en ce qui concerne les mesures sanitaires. Et pour les voyageurs, on doit suivre les règles d'autres pays en ce qui concerne les vaccinations et on doit avoir une approche pour ça. Mais en pleine d'une pandémie, avec une élection, en pleine d'une quatrième vague d'une pandémie, on doit travailler ensemble. Tous les niveaux de gouvernement, les provinces, le fédéral, c'est le temps pour un fédéralisme de partenariat, ce n'est pas le temps pour les États.
Next question.
Mr. O'Toole, Michael Couture with Global National. Every time we seem to ask you the question, you add one more piece of material that you would give the people fighting the Taliban. So I'm going to give you one more opportunity. Yes or no, would you give them weapons to fight the Taliban?
Mike, as I said in my message last night, this is a very somber ending chapter to a somber war in Afghanistan. This was the longest mission men and women in the Canadian Armed Forces served. Military families across the country continue to suffer from the wounds of that conflict. Our goal is to help people, establishing the corridors, helping the refugees, and minimizing the ability for people to be harmed by the Taliban. That's giving material and political support that is not meant to be offensive. It's meant to protect. It's meant to provide assistance, intelligence, to help isolate and keep the Taliban away from areas where they could harm people. There are people that Mr. Trudeau has not acted to bring home for months that are at risk with the Taliban because they served with Canada, with our aid workers, with our military. We owe it to them to protect them. So that material, that will be the focus. Helping provide hope, helping provide a way out of the chaos in that country, and helping to save lives.
As a follow-up, I'll talk to you a little bit about your Atlantic province swing, since we're on it. A place that your party only has 3 seats, and specifically here in Newfoundland and Labrador. Atlantic Canada, you were shut out completely in 2015, excuse me. Your party hasn't had much success in Newfoundland and Labrador either. What makes you think that you can do something different in Atlantic Canada to have a breakthrough for the Conservatives?
Because Atlantic Canadians, Newfoundlanders, and Labradorians are tired of being ignored by Justin Trudeau. The Silent Six is what people in this province call the Liberal MPs who've allowed Justin Trudeau to dismantle the offshore industry, to not stand up for highly impacted sectors like travel and tourism. I'm here because I'm proud of the incredible men and women stepping up for Canada's recovery plan, for Canada's Conservative. Carol Ansey here in Corner Brook. We are here for Canadians. We're here for the small business owners that are worried, the families that are worried. The fact that Atlantic Canada has not even had an Atlantic Canada minister of the Opportunities Agency for Atlantic Canada, they've been from Ontario or Quebec, just shows that Mr. Trudeau takes Atlantic Canada for granted. I want to make sure our economic recovery includes all sectors and all regions of this country. Newfoundlanders and Labradorians deserve an economic recovery just as much as anyone else, and Conservatives will deliver one. Je suis ici à Terre-Neuve parce que les Terre-Neuviennes méritent une relance économique, juste comme toutes les autres familles canadiennes. Et après six ans d'inaction avec le gouvernement de M. Trudeau, avec le secteur du tourisme, les ressources naturelles ici à Terre-Neuve, on a besoin d'un plan pour les emplois et pour les opportunités. Je suis fier de nos candidats et candidates comme Carol Hancy ici à Corner Brook. Nous sommes ici pour le bien-être des Canadiens. Et on a un plan pour une relance économique, notre plan pour le rétablissement du Canada. Et les Canadiens ici, dans la région, sont tannés après 6 ans d'inaction de M. Trudeau.
This will be the last question. Ce sera la dernière question.
Good morning, Colleen Connors here with CBC. I'd like to know what you're going to do about Muskrat Falls. Trudeau just announced the $5.2 billion deal, which hopefully will help people in Newfoundland and Labrador stop their electricity bills from spiking. But I'd like to know what you're going to do about Muskrat Falls, which is expected to cost $13 billion.
We've always said we will be here for Newfoundland and Labrador. When we were in government, we provided the loan guarantees to get projects like Muskrat Falls off the ground. We want to see the ability for Newfoundlanders and Labradorians to have a strong economy and to be able to provide opportunity for the province themselves. That's why we also are the only party in this campaign that supports the offshore. The offshore is 25% of the economy. So the businesses that also need those certainty on power rates, they need that injection of jobs and investment from the offshore. So we're putting $1.5 billion to re-kickstart the offshore here in Newfoundland and Labrador. People from this province work hard. They even leave this province for weeks and on time, leave their families to work hard for their families and to build their communities back here. The Conservatives will have their back. On doit travailler avec tous les paliers du gouvernement et pour les Terre-Neuviens et leur relance économique. On a travaillé avec Terre-Neuve sur le projet Muskrat Falls comme un gouvernement et on va toujours travailler en partenariat avec les provinces. Nous sommes le seul parti en faveur de le secteur des ressources naturelles ici à Terre-Neuve. On va donner un investissement de 1,5 milliard de dollars pour le offshore ici à Terre-Neuve. C'est un investissement important parce que 25% de l'économie ici à Terre-Neuve est dans le domaine de ressources naturelles. Et les Terre-Neuviens méritent une opportunité de travailler très fort chez nous.
I don't know if you really answered if you would scrap the deal that Trudeau just announced or if you would keep this $5.2 billion deal.
We will always work with Newfoundland and Labrador to make sure that they can balance the Muskrat Falls project and its overruns alongside their need to make sure that they can provide social services supports and access the debt markets. We were there for the project at the beginning. We will be there for the province as a government. In fact, we are the only party that doesn't try and pick fights in the middle of an election with the provinces. I'm proposing a federalism of partnership. And part of that partnership is also making sure key sectors of the economy, like the offshore, rebounce and rebuild so that Newfoundland and Labrador has the ability to build opportunity for people here in the province. We will be a partner.
It will be all for today. Ce sera tout pour aujourd'hui. Merci. Bonne
Merci
journée.
beaucoup. Merci beaucoup.